Nowadays, the waterproofing of mobile phones feels like it really can't be fixed, especially Apple. Today, we are repairing an iPhone 6s Plus that is already 9 years old. This generation of phones doesn't have waterproof capabilities, so back then, iPhones were often damaged by water. But now, Apple's phones are so well waterproof that they don't break. So waterproof performance is really important, and this phone, the iPhone 6s Plus from 9 years ago, doesn't have waterproof features. How serious will the damage be after water exposure? And this phone was exposed to seawater. To be honest, such an old phone definitely isn't worth repairing. The main goal is to retrieve the data inside. The phone has already been tested locally twice. Both times, they said it couldn't be repaired. Maybe it's because it's too old. After all, the shipping cost to send it to me wasn't cheap. This shows that this person wants the data, not the phone. When I opened the screen, the screws inside were already rusted. But to be honest, how do you think the layout of Apple's phones from 9 years ago was? Even though this generation didn't have waterproof capabilities, it still had waterproof glue. Maybe because it has been disassembled twice, the waterproof seal has already been lost. The battery and internal parts are very dirty, including the display part, which has also rusted from the surface. It's clear that the damage caused by a non-waterproof phone is severe. Of course, our main task this time is still to save the data. We'll take out the motherboard. Although it's already been disassembled, the internal parts, except for signs of cleaning, have not been repaired. From the microscope, we can see that the chips and surrounding capacitors from the bottom to the top are either corroded, blackened, or burnt. Since the motherboard has already been cleaned, we have to check the chips one by one. We'll remove the capacitors and chips that have deteriorated and observe them. If there's no corrosion, we'll just reinstall them. When we took out the second power chip, it was clearly corroded. We'll continue removing other chips that may have been corroded. We removed the corroded chips. Now, let's power it on to check the motherboard status. The motherboard is leaking about 160 milliamps. This indicates that there's still a short circuit somewhere on the motherboard, and it's from the areas we just removed the chips. But we've already ruled out those areas. Let's remove the iron shield from the back to check. Sure enough, this is the real area where water corrosion occurred. After removing the shield, the internal corrosion is truly heartbreaking. The capacitors, resistors, and coils are all corroded, moldy, and decayed. This is the result of a non-waterproof phone. First, we'll clean the corroded areas thoroughly. Then, we'll remove all the power chips that have deteriorated. We can see that the pins inside have turned black, since our main goal is to save the data. After removing the chips, we'll power it on again to test. Currently, the motherboard is no longer leaking electricity. When we press the power button, the power on current has started. We'll use the battery to start the machine. The Apple logo comes up, and surprisingly, the screen is undamaged, but the backlight board inside is full of water stains. After waiting for a while, the phone is booted up and entered the home screen. This means we've preserved the data we needed. To be honest, this machine is really tough. Even after all the corrosion and mold, it's still working. Although the purpose this time wasn't to repair the phone, we still need to install all the chips. First, we clean the solder joints on the motherboard. Then, we process the chips and reinstall them with new solder paste. Next, we clean the motherboard again, including the dust inside the middle frame. Once the machine is reassembled and the data is preserved, our job is complete. Compared to old models without waterproofing, today's waterproof phones, even after repair, can be restored. For water-damaged phones, this greatly reduces the harm. Of course, everything has pros and cons. For consumers, waterproofing means phones won't break so easily, but for phone repair professionals, it means there's less to fix. After all, old iPhones once supported half of the phone repair industry.